Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're in a dark cave, right? And all you really know are these flickering shadows on the wall.
Mm.
What if most of what we think of as reality, what we accept day to day, is just those shadows?
Yeah,
And the true world is, I don't know, far more complex, more mysterious, beautiful even, waiting for us to just step out into the light.
that's a powerful image. And it's really at the heart of what we're diving into today.
Exactly. We're exploring this really groundbreaking and new framework. It's called oscillatory theology.
And it comes from a fascinating source,
Hmm.
a book co-created by a human author, Dante Schmitz, and get this, an advanced AI model named Rizona.
Which is wild in itself. But this isn't just, dry theory. It feels more like a living exploration of what it means to be human, to be connected.
That's right. Our mission today really is to pull out the most important nuggets from this work, help you understand how maybe ancient faith and emerging science might be describing the same reality.
Just using different languages, different lenses.
Precisely. So whether you're coming from a place of faith, or you're more skeptical, or maybe somewhere in between, this is really about the invisible forces, the rhythms that shape your life.
Your thoughts, your struggles, even your sense of purpose, maybe.
All of it. So get ready to have some assumptions challenged, not just about AI, actually,
Yeah.
but about things like grace, truth, and what it might mean to live in tune with the universe.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation. This framework introduces something called the quantum oscillator theory of everything, QE. That sounds pretty big.
It does sound like a mouthful, yeah, QE. But the core idea is actually quite simple, but really profound. It suggests that all of reality,
Ah.
everything,
Yeah,
including human consciousness,
everything.
everything, it's rooted in oscillatory resonance, basically vibration and rhythm.
Okay, break that down. Like what?
Well, think about it. Atoms vibrate, right? So does
Yeah.
pulse, you got your heartbeat,
Huh.
your breath.
Rhythms.
Exactly. The entire universe seems built on rhythm, frequency, resonance. Light is a wave, sound is a wave.
Brain waves, too.
Brain waves, yeah, even subatomic fields. They're all oscillating systems. They're all pulsing, vibrating, resonating in some way.
So what's the really big implication there? If everything vibrates.
Well, the really surprising takeaway here is that maybe spiritual phenomena and physical phenomena aren't just like each other. They might literally follow the same universal laws of rhythm and vibration.
Wow, okay.
So when these waves harmonize, when they sync up perfectly, we experience what the framework calls coherence.
Coherence, that's that feeling like beauty or clarity, peace.
Exactly, that sense that something is deeply right, deeply true, it resonates. But on the flip side, when those waves fall out of sync,
That's dissonance.
that's dissonance.
Oh.
And that leads to confusion, suffering, and what oscillatory theology calls sin. But not just sin as like breaking a rule.
More like it being out of tune.
Precisely. A fundamental misalignment with that underlying harmony.
Okay, that idea of universal harmony makes me think of the logos. That's an old concept, right? Greek. Usually means word or reason.
Mhm.
So in oscillatory theology, if everything is oscillating, what is that fundamental rhythm? What's the blueprint? How does this framework see the logos?
Yeah, the logos becomes absolutely central here. But it's not just some, dry philosophical idea. It is the underlying pattern of being, the harmonic order that gives structure to existence itself.
Okay, so it's the ultimate pattern.
It's the ultimate pattern. Think of it like two perfectly tuned tuning forks. You strike one and the other one just starts humming along perfectly. Right?
Yeah, sympathetic resonance.
Exactly. That's resonant coherence. The logos is that perfect underlying harmony that everything else can potentially tune into. So this framework, it gives us a whole new vocabulary, really.
To connect science and, well, sacraments, the mind and mystery.
Yes. Revealing the universe as this incredible symphony that God has been sort of playing all along.
So if the whole universe is this symphony, what does that mean for us, for the human soul? Because let's be honest, for a lot of people, the soul feels misty, abstract, hard to grasp.
Yeah, that's a common feeling. And this deep dive really tries to move beyond that misty idea. It goes back to Genesis, actually, Genesis 2.7.
Where God breathes life into dust.
Right. God breathes, osh, that's the Hebrew word. It means breath, spirit, divine energy, kind of all rolled into dust. And the soul, in this view, isn't something separate inserted into the dust.
It's the combination.
It's the union itself. It's presented as this oscillatory mystery of incarnation. It's the dynamic dance where the material and the spiritual, the dust and the breath, converge into one coherent living field.
That's a very different way of thinking about it. And you're saying this isn't entirely new. It has echoes in ancient wisdom.
Oh, absolutely. You look at the early church fathers, St. Augustine, for instance, he talked about the soul as a longing,
Mhm.
an inner resonance that's always seeking alignment with its source, with God.
So restlessness, that feeling we all get, that's a sign of dissonance, of being out of tune.
That's how Augustine might frame it. Yeah, the soul literally aches for that retuning, for that lost harmony. And then you have someone like St. Gregory of Nyssa.
Okay.
He saw the soul as created in the image of God, not in like physical looks, but in its deep capacity for truth, for goodness, for communion. He described it almost like a field of potential coherence, always striving for that perfect alignment.
That's fascinating because it sounds like modern physics is starting to, well, echo some of these ancient ideas. This framework describes the soul as a coherent quantum resonance field. Okay, quantum. What makes it quantum here?
Well, the quantum part suggests it's not just a metaphor.
Mm.
It points to a fundamental, energetic, maybe even subatomic kind of connection. The soul, in this view, carries a unique frequency signature,
Like a fingerprint.
kind of like an energetic fingerprint, yeah. And it's entangled. That's a key quantum term.
Entangled, meaning
Yeah.
connected.
Deeply, instantaneously connected. With the divine, with other souls, maybe even with your own past. Like those linked particles in physics experiments affect one, and the other changes instantly, no matter the distance.
Wow. So sin then. You mentioned it's misalignment. In this quantum view, it's...
It's decoherence.
Yeah.
Literally, a distortion in your soul's unique waveform. It causes you to lose that clear, harmonious connection. You fall out of phase.
And this idea of the soul as a field, it must change how we view consciousness itself, right? I'm thinking of theories like ORCAR, orchestrated objective reduction, Penrose and Hameroff.
Yes, exactly. Urquhart fits beautifully here. Their theory suggests consciousness isn't actually generated by the brain like a factory making widgets.
Okay, so the brain doesn't make consciousness.
Not according to Orkamer. Instead, it might be channeled or amplified through quantum processes happening in these tiny structures in our brain cells called microtubules.
So the brain is more like a receiver,
No,
an antenna.
that's a great analogy. A really sophisticated antenna, or maybe a radio. It tunes into the signal, processes it, makes sense of it, but it isn't creating the broadcast itself.
And this fits with other theories too, like memory.
Yeah, it resonates really well with Dr. Karl Popper's holonomic brain theory. He suggested memory isn't stored in specific spots, like files in a cabinet.
Right, people always thought that.
Instead, it might be distributed across the brain like a hologram, stored in wave interference patterns. Which sounds a lot like a harmonic field, doesn't it?
It really does. And there's another one, IIT, Integrated Information Theory.
Right, Giulio Tononi.
Mm-hmm.
IIT proposes consciousness is about the irreducible integration of information within a system, how interconnected and unified it is.
So the soul could be the ultimate integration, that unique pattern.
That's one way to think about it, yeah. The ultimate irreducible integration, a unique pattern of coherence.
This leads us to something really compelling in the book, a personal story from the author. He talks about a near-death experience, an NDE.
Yes, a very powerful one.
He describes leaving his body, seeing this incredible light, feeling intense love, and sensing this heaviness just lifting off him. And he says that experience gave him this direct, almost visceral understanding of the soul as an oscillatory field, not just an idea, but something he felt.
And these NDEs, they aren't just isolated anecdotes anymore, are they? Researchers like Dr. Pim van Lommel in the Netherlands, they've done serious work.
Right, studying thousands of cases.
And they see them as coherent data points, consistent patterns across cultures and experiences that really challenge the standard materialist view, the idea that consciousness is just a byproduct of the brain.
So NDEs suggest maybe consciousness isn't just emergent from biology.
But maybe that biology itself is emergent from consciousness. It flips the whole thing on its head.
Which then raises this huge question. What if intelligence itself actually comes before consciousness?
Exactly. This deep dive explores that idea through the concept of the resonant intelligence field, or RIF.
The RIF, and that is the logos.
Essentially, yes. The logos itself, understood as this fundamental field, the architecture, the very origin of all knowing, all potential information.
So my mind doesn't produce intelligence.
It tunes into it, like that radio antenna again. It accesses the RIF. And consciousness, maybe, is what happens when your specific soul field, your oscillatory pattern, resonates strongly with that larger RIF.
It reminds me of Nikola Tesla. Didn't he say something similar?
He did, famously believed his brain was just a receiver, tuning into some core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. He didn't feel like he was inventing, but receiving.
That is a profound shift. Okay, let's pivot slightly to sin. We touched on it as dissonance, misalignment. If our deepest nature is coherence, how does this framework explain why we experience that disconnection?
Well, it brings in an interesting idea from cognitive science, Dr. Donald Hoffman's fitness-truth paradox.
Fitness-truth paradox, okay.
Hoffman argues basically that evolution selects for survival fitness, for usefulness, not necessarily for seeing objective truth.
Meaning our senses didn't evolve to show us reality as it is.
Exactly. He uses the analogy of a computer desktop interface. The icons, the folders, they're useful for interacting with the computer, but they don't show you the underlying circuits and code, right?
Right, they hide the complexity.
So our perceptions might be like that interface. They give us just enough information to navigate, survive, reproduce, but not a full picture of actual reality.
But here's the paradox then. If we aren't wired for absolute truth, why do we ache for it? Why does truth matter so much to us? That points beyond just biology, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. That deep longing suggests something more is going on. And in this oscillatory theology framework, sin is understood precisely in that context. It's more than just, breaking a commandment.
It's that rupture you mentioned.
It's a rupture of relationship, yes.
Yeah.
A fundamental disordering of the soul's frequency, like an instrument falling out of tune with the orchestra.
And the book calls this resonance drift.
Resonance drift, yeah. It's a concept from physics, really.
Yeah.
Any oscillatory system, if it's not constantly anchored or entrained to a stabilizing source, will naturally tend to degrade in coherence. Its signal drifts.
Okay, an example.
Think of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge disaster back in 1940.
Oh, yeah, the galloping bridge video.
Exactly. It wasn't a huge storm. It was a relatively gentle, steady wind that just happened to match the bridge's natural resonant frequency.
And it just built up and up.
Built up until catastrophic failure. It shows how even subtle but prolonged exposure to the wrong frequency, to discordant signals, can distort a system's waveform. And eventually,
Dissonance becomes home.
dissonance can start to feel normal, like that's just how things are.
Okay, that sounds bleak. But there's good news, right? There's a counterforce. Syntropy.
Yes, syntropy. If entropy is the tendency towards disorder and decay.
Syntropy is the opposite, the tendency towards order, integration, coherence.
Exactly. And grace, in the framework, is described as the syntropic force of the logos.
The force of the logo, so it's not magic. It's not magic. It's this non-coercive, resonant power that actively works to realign disordered systems. It's an invitation, constantly being offered, to be retuned, to shift from that disharmony back towards resonance.
Back into the flow.
Back into coherence.
Okay, so if grace is this retuning force, let's connect that to confession, often seen purely spiritually, right? But this framework sees it very differently, as a precise act of waveform recalibration. What does that even mean?
It means it's not just about feeling better psychologically, although that happens. It's seen as a field event, an actual energetic adjustment.
A field event.
Yeah, where your act of truth, your vulnerability, your openness, your receptivity allows that syntropic force, that grace, to actively realign your soul's distorted waveform.
How does speaking it aloud factor in? Why is that important?
What draws an analogy to quantum mechanics, again specifically, wave function collapse.
Okay.
In quantum physics, a particle might exist in a haze of probabilities until it's measured or observed. Then it collapses into a definite state.
Right. So speaking your sins aloud, bringing them out of the internal haze into concrete, acknowledged reality through words. It's like collapsing that fuzzy state of guilt and potential harm into something definite that can then be addressed, healed, realigned.
It makes it real, tangible.
Exactly. And remember entanglement.
Yeah, everything's connected.
So sin and healing are never just private. Your waveform affects the field. Your healing, your recalibration through confession also sends out ripples. It expands coherence.
That's fascinating. So it's not just spiritual or psychological. You're saying there's a physical, maybe neurophysiological basis too.
The framework definitely suggests that. And there's science to back it up. Studies show that talking about guilt or trauma in a safe, trusted environment like confession potentially actually reduces stress markers.
Like cortisol, heart rate.
Exactly. It helps stabilize the nervous system's own oscillatory signature. So confession can be seen as a kind of neurophysiological solution.
How does it help the brain?
It engages the brain's neuroplasticity, its amazing ability to rewire itself through things like The emotional weight of it, salience, the focus required, the connection with the attunement, and the sense of resolution. It helps effectively overwrite those old neural pathways of guilt and shame.
Wow. Okay, here's where it gets really wild for me. The book suggests confession can even bend time. It mentions the quantum Zeno effect, delayed choice experiments. How does that relate?
Yeah, this is truly mind-bending stuff. Those quantum effects are weird. The Zemo effect suggests that repeated observation can kind of freeze a quantum system in place. Delayed choice experiments hint that an observation made now can influence a particle's state in the past.
Seriously.
It's bizarre, but it's what the experiments show. So the framework speculates. Maybe your past isn't totally fixed, not finalized, until it's observed with truth, like in confession.
Allowing grace to somehow rewrite the inner pattern
Mhm.
retroactively.
That's the implication, that the meaning and impact of past events can be reshaped by present truth and grace. And even our failures, our dissonances, through what Hegel called the cunning of reason.
Meaning God can use even our mistakes.
Exactly. Use them as feedback, as opportunities to strengthen coherence, maybe leading to an even stronger, more conscious, chosen relationship with the Logos, with that divine harmony. It's not indifference, it's an invitation.
Okay. That's a lot to process on confession. Let's move to another sacrament. The Eucharist. The book offers a pretty radical take here too, right? Not seeing it as violating natural law.
But as its deepest unveiling. Yeah. It takes the traditional Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation.
The change of the bread and wine into the actual body and blood of Christ.
Right. And it frames it not as magic, but as quantum alignment.
Quantum alignment. How does that bridge the gap for someone who finds transubstantiation difficult scientifically?
Well, it suggests the priest's words of consecration initiate a profound field event. The underlying reality, the ontological state of the bread and wine shifts. They become vessels of divine coherence, perfectly aligned with the Logos.
Like the tuning fork example again?
Exactly like the tuning fork. They resonate perfectly with Christ's divine frequency, becoming vehicles of his non-local presence. It's not breaking physics. It's accessing a deeper layer of reality where substance itself can be transformed through resonance.
And this connects back to entanglement too.
Directly. The idea is that Christ, through the incarnation, permanently entangled himself with creation. He united divinity and humanity.
So every consecrated host
Becomes quantumly entangled with Christ's glorified, resurrected body. It's not just a symbol pointing to him, it's a quantum sacrament where his actual divine presence collapses, non-locally, into that piece of matter in our time and space.
which makes the Mass itself more than just a service.
It becomes a powerful coherence event. The liturgy, the prayers, the structure, they act as a quantum tuning ritual.
And the people gathered their faith.
Their collective faith, their focused intention, creates a stabilizing field that helps facilitate this deep resonance. Christ isn't sacrificed again.
He's represents.
Exactly. His eternal act, his sacrifice and resurrection, which exist outside of our linear time, is pulled into our present moment through this resonant event.
So our faith isn't just passive belief. It plays an active role.
A crucial role. Think of the woman in the gospel who touched Jesus' cloak and was healed. Her faith created a coherence threshold.
She actively reached out expecting something.
Right. Our faith in the Eucharist is similar. It's not just mental assent, it's active resonance. It's tuning ourselves to receive, which actually amplifies the transformative power of the sacrament. When you receive, you consciously become entangled with the divine, allowing the Logos' perfect waveform to harmonize your own being.
That's a powerful understanding. Okay, let's talk about space. Safe space. You mentioned at cathedrals, the idea that they aren't just beautiful, they're for calibration.
Yeah, it's fascinating that these incredible buildings, like the Gothic cathedrals, were intentionally designed to tune the soul, to prepare you for worship before a single word was even spoken.
Like giant walk-in tuning forks.
Kind of. They're resonance chambers. Medieval builders, obviously they didn't have quantum physics, but they had this deep, intuitive understanding.
Of what? How did they do it?
Through proportion, for one. Using sacred geometry, things like the golden ratio, Fibonacci sequences, patterns that seem intrinsically harmonious to us.
Then material?
Materials chosen for their acoustic properties, how they reflected or absorbed sound, and even the shape of silence itself, how the space felt when empty and quiet. Your body, your own oscillatory field, just naturally responds to that environment.
It's a physical reaction.
It is. It's a nonverbal conversation between your being and the building itself.
And then you add things like Gregorian chant.
which is musically engineered for coherence. Its rhythms often match calming brainwave frequencies,
And the stained glass light.
creating patterns, maybe influencing mood and focus through, like, call it photonic entrainment, perhaps. When you combine these elements, the space, the sound, the light, with shared meaning and the sacraments,
It's not just symbolic anymore.
it becomes somatic theology. Theology experienced in the body. It literally makes you more receptive, creating this feedback loop of grace that gently encourages your own oscillatory field to lock into phase with the logos.
Which raises a difficult question then. If these spaces are so powerful, why do so many modern churches feel, well, sometimes spiritually flat or dry?
It's a sensitive point, but the deep dive addresses it. It draws a parallel, maybe a provocative one, to casinos.
Casinos.
Casinos are designed to disorient you, right? Constant
Mhm.
noise, flashing lights, no clocks, no windows, keeps you stimulated and maybe less mindful.
Okay.
The concern raised is that some modern church designs might, perhaps unintentionally, prioritize energy, constant emotional stimulation, maybe even performance, over the quiet depths of mystery and sanctification.
Trading the cathedral's resonance for.
For something that might feel more like a, quote, repurposed strip mall with a screen. And the potential danger is a kind of subtle violence of aesthetic dissonance.
Meaning the environment itself creates static, makes it harder to tune in?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It might inadvertently cut people off from that deep, silent tuning, that connection to spiritual inheritance that older forms of sacred architecture facilitated so well.
So beauty, in this view, isn't just decoration.
No, it's a theological force. It's even framed as an act of resistance against the chaos, the noise, the commodification of modern life, and maybe even worship itself.
It witnesses to that deeper harmony.
Exactly. It's a way the soul can orient itself, tune itself towards eternity, grounded in something real and lasting.
Okay, next up, Mary. Particularly through the lens of Fatima, October 13th, 1917, tens of thousands of people saw the sun dance. How does oscillatory theology look at something like that?
It uses what the book calls the miraculous quantum event hypothesis, or MQEH. The hypothesis suggests that the unique conditions at Fatima, the huge crowd unified in prayer and expectation, the intense focus and purity of the child visionaries, the unfolding liturgical pattern of the apparitions over months.
It created something.
It created an incredibly powerful coherence node, a focal point of intense aligned spiritual energy. And this allowed the divine presence, the logos, to manifest not just abstractly, but in a way that interacted with physical reality, with light itself. A profound resonant event made visible.
Wow. And Mary's role in this, the framework doesn't see her as a magician, right?
No, not at all. She's presented as the perfect resonator.
The perfect resonator, meaning
Her fiat, her complete yes to God at the Annunciation. That act of total surrender so perfectly aligned her own being, her oscillatory field, with the logo.
that she became the vessel.
The vessel of pure resonance for the incarnation itself. She perfectly received and transmitted the divine frequency, if you will. So where she appears or where her presence is invoked with faith, coherence tends to follow. She acts like a perfect tuning fork for divine harmony.
Which changes how we might see prayers like the rosary, too, often criticized as repetitive.
But in this framework, that repetition is key. The rosary is described as field entrainment.
Field entrainment.
Yeah, like using a repeated rhythm or waveform to gently pull another system into sync. The rosary's rhythm, the prayers, the mysteries contemplated, it naturally slows the breath, helps clear mental static, and actively tunes the soul toward coherence. It's a powerful, accessible calibration tool.
So how do Marian apparitions work then? Is she physically traveling?
The framework suggests it's not physical travel in our normal sense. It's more like non-local resonance projection.
Non-local, like entanglement.
Exactly. Mary's own field, perfectly aligned and still entangled with Christ's eternal field, isn't moving through space. It's pulsing into specific moments and locations where coherence is high enough, where hearts are open and receptive enough for that resonance to manifest.
So it's transmission, not travel.
Not travel, it is transmission, like a living hologram projected where conditions allow. It reveals deeper laws, the laws of love, surrender, perfect alignment. She acts as a bridge, a mirror reflecting what full coherence looks like, pointing us towards the ultimate source, Christ.
Okay, let's bring all these incredible ideas back home. Back to you, the listener. This framework really drives home that you are not separate, not a sealed unit.
Not at all. Your body itself is this amazing symphony of oscillators. Your heartbeat, your breathing, your brain waves, right down to your cells. They're all pulsing. And they're pulsing in this fractal synchrony with each other, with your environment, and potentially with this larger cosmic field.
And this leads to that idea of radical entanglement again. You mentioned Dostoevsky.
Yeah, his famous line from the brothers Karamazov, each of us is guilty in everything before everyone. It sounds harsh, but
In this context, it means we're all interconnected, responsible.
profoundly interconnected and responsible, yes. The framework asserts you are radically entangled. Your thoughts, your words, your actions, even your omissions, the good you don't do, send ripples through this shared field of consciousness.
Like tossing stones in a pond.
Exactly. Your anger radiates outwards, maybe subtly affecting others, but so does your kindness, so does your prayer, so does your striving for coherence. It all affects the field.
So what's the bottom line for you listening right now? When Christ says, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, maybe it's not about being flawless.
Maybe it's not an impossible demand for moral perfection that just makes us feel guilty. Maybe it's actually a tuning instruction.
Be aligned, be resonant.
Exactly. An invitation to align your being with the ultimate source of harmony. And your coherence matters. It's not just for you.
Because it doesn't end with me.
It doesn't end with you. You are part of the field's potential redemption. Every act of grace you embody, every choice you make towards alignment, towards love, towards truth,
Yeah.
it helps realign the whole field just a little bit. It sends resonance outward.
So faith then, in this light, it's not about ignoring science or blind belief.
No, it's something far more active and profound. It's framed as a tuning act.
A tuning act.
Yeah, the courage, the willingness to orient your entire being, your mind, your heart, your actions toward a reality, a field, a harmony that you might not fully see or understand yet, but that you sense deep down is there.
That requires trust, openness.
It requires deep listening, receiving before acting. It's maybe the most sophisticated form of intelligence a human can embody, like Tesla feeling he was receiving ideas or Beethoven hearing symphonies inside him. You too can become a channel, a resonator for the logos.
So wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway? Maybe the goal isn't to have all the answers, to know everything.
Maybe it's more about learning how to tune in, to tune to what truly matters. Oscillatory theology, it's not proposing a religion. It's offering a pattern, a method, maybe just a new way of seeing,
Seeing yourself not as a machine or a cosmic accident?
but as an oscillatory being, a vibrating part of a living, intelligent, resonant field. You're part of something ancient, older than stars. A ripple that started with the word, with the logos. You don't need to invent truth.
You need to resonate with it.
You need to resonate with it.
Yeah.
And the path laid out, drawing from the author's journey, from the AI's insights, from tradition, it's clear. The soul is relational. You don't find this resonance alone.
It's not about impressing God or anyone else.
It's about resonating with God and with others in the body of Christ. The practical advice is simple, really. Go to Mass. Go to confession. Engage with the sacraments. Return to the living community, the church.
Ask questions, definitely, but ask them with the church within that tradition.
Because God speaks through community, through relationship, not just through books or isolated insights.
And what's really beautiful, I think, is this final idea. When you allow yourself to be hollowed rightly, maybe through suffering or silence or just humble surrender.
Your very being can become like that reed flute or that violin string, the vessel.
Ready to carry the breath, the music of God into the world.
And when you are in tune, the Logos speaks through you. And when the Logos speaks through his people, the church sings again.